After a few episodes catching up on Rome, we're heading back east to Judea. We need to touch on the Herods, as in Herod the Great's dynasty, the guy who tried to kill baby Jesus in the Christmas story. Why do we need to touch on the Herods? The Herods are the local ruling family that Rome used to control their eastern provinces. So, the Herods are the connection between the Roman Empire and the early church in Jerusalem. We've already mentioned the Herods several times. For example, in the last episode, we saw how Herod Agrippa, a childhood buddy of Caligula, stopped Caligula from putting his statue in the temple in Jerusalem and causing who knows what riots and chaos. In the New Testament, there are actually 6 different Herods: Herod the Great, Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, Herod Philip, Herod Agrippa I, and Herod Agrippa II. And that doesn't include references to wives and daughters of the Herods. Let's get it out of the way. The Herods are an exceedingly complex family to understand. Almost everyone uses the name Herod, first off, and the family tree was all kinds of jacked up. There were marriages and second marriages within the family, and marriages between different generations within the family. It is impossible to understand that soap opera, and we're not going to try. We're going to sketch some outlines and hit the highlights. Also, to make it a little easier, I will only refer to Herod the Great as Herod, and everybody else will be their distinctive name. For example, Herod Agrippa will just be Agrippa. Okay, so Rome preferred to rule their outer provinces like Judea through client kings, who were rulers installed by Rome and who ultimately received their authority from Rome. These puppet kings were given some freedom to run their territory as they saw fit, as long as the local population paid taxes and didn't rebel. So we're in the first half of the 40s as we've marched through our timeline, and Agrippa is the current Herod in charge of Judea and the surrounding provinces. Agrippa was the grandson of Herod the Great, the Herod from the Christmas story, who asks the Magi, "Where is that baby you are calling King of the Jews? It just so happens that's my title." And Herod then orders all the boys under 2 in Bethlehem to be killed to end the threat of a rival to his throne. Herod ruled Judea as a client king from 37 BC to 4 BC. He died while Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were in Egypt, where they had fled to escape Herod's grasp, and only returned when Joseph heard from an angel that Herod had died. The Jews hated Herod for many reasons. First, he was an Edomite by birth, so he was not ethnically Jewish, though he more or less observed Jewish practices. Second, around 40 BC, Rome asked Herod to conquer Judea, which he did with brutality and much bloodshed. Herod was a pragmatic ruler who spilled whatever blood he needed to protect his rule. Third, Herod was paranoid of potential rivals, hence his killing of the Bethlehem babies. He killed his brother-in-law, mother-in-law, one of his wives, 3 of his sons, and 46 members of the Jewish high court. Augustus, emperor during Herod's rule, said, "It is better to be one of Herod's pigs than one of his sons." As in, Jews don't eat pork, so Herod probably killed more sons than he killed pigs. To recap, he was not technically Jewish, conquered Judea for Rome, and brutally killed to preserve his throne. No, the Jews did not like Herod. Unrelated to the fact that he was a terrible person, Herod was a competent ruler. Herod's economic policies and promotion of international trade enriched Judea. Herod was also able to secure exemption for Jews from serving in the Roman military, as well as exemption from participating in emperor worship, the latter being a blatant idolatry. Most importantly, Herod was an incredibly prolific builder. Of his many building projects, 2 are definitely worth highlighting. The first is Caesarea Maritima, the port where Rome's military was headquartered for that region and where Peter converted the centurion Cornelius. At Caesarea, Herod built a harbor where huge ships could dock, a palace for himself with a pool jutting out into the ocean, and massive public buildings like the theater overlooking the ocean. Herod named it Caesarea in honor of Caesar Augustus. Second, Herod built Jerusalem as it stood when Jesus and the apostles were living and preaching. Herod built a magnificent palace for himself within the city. He built fortifications, the walls and towers, and Antonia fortress. Most importantly, he enhanced the temple and temple mount, which sat on massive retaining walls. Quick temple history lesson. The first temple was built by Solomon in 957 BC and stood for almost 400 years until Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, destroyed the temple in 586 BC. This was when Nebuchadnezzar took the Jews to Babylon, the Babylonian exile. Then Cyrus the Great's Persian Empire took over the Babylonian Empire, and Cyrus allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem in 538 BC. They rebuilt the temple, though it was not nearly as magnificent as Solomon's temple. However, 500 years later, Herod's reconstruction made the temple surpass even Solomon's temple. Herod's temple was destroyed by Rome in 70 AD, but that is an upcoming video. All that is left today of Herod's temple is a portion of the Temple Mount, which is known as the Western Wall. Herod built many other fortresses and palaces and is considered one of the most prolific builders of monumental architecture in the ancient world. So, Herod was a prolific builder who helped his region prosper and advocated for the Jewish people. On the other hand, he was a vicious tyrant who killed whoever needed to be killed to keep his position secure. When Herod died in 4 BC, 3 of his sons split his territory. First was Archelaus, who took over the area surrounding Jerusalem, but was a terrible ruler, so Rome installed a Roman prefect to govern the region. Fifth in the line of those Roman prefects of Judea was Pontius Pilate. Second was Antipas, who ruled over Galilee and the land east of the Jordan. This is the Herod Luke is talking about in his gospel when he says, "At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, 'Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you.' Jesus replied, 'Go tell that fox. I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal.'" This is also the Herod that had John the Baptist beheaded, which happened here at this hilltop fortress called Machaerus, located east of the Dead Sea in modern Jordan. Third, Herod Philip ruled the area north and east of Galilee. He married Salome, his niece, who danced for John the Baptist's head. That was the second generation of Herods, and they overlapped with Tiberius. We will end with one Herod from the third generation, Agrippa I. His father was another of Herod's sons, Aristobulus IV, who was not one of the 3 Herod's sons we just talked about. Agrippa is important because he is the Herod who ruled in the early 40s, the early church era. Agrippa was raised in Rome and was enmeshed in Roman politics. He supported Caligula's succession to emperor and used his connection to convince Caligula not to put a statue of himself in the Jerusalem temple. Agrippa was in Rome when Caligula was assassinated, and Agrippa helped save Claudius from assassination and then helped Claudius get proclaimed new emperor by the Praetorian Guard. His friendships with emperors yielded Agrippa a large territory to rule in Judea and the surrounding lands. Agrippa is significant in the New Testament for 2 things. He is the Herod who put Peter in prison, and he executed James, the brother of John, which is the topic of our next video. But to wrap up the Herods, here is how Luke narrates the death of Agrippa in 44 AD, only months after executing James and imprisoning Peter. This verse occurs while Agrippa is conducting official business. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a God, not of a man." Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of God continued to spread and flourish.